Okay.
Okay, this is an interview at the Chapman Museum, Glens Falls, New York. It is the 18th of February 2004, approximately 1 p.m. Interviewers.
Dan.
Okay. Interviewers are Mike Russert and Wayne Clark. Could you give me your full name, date of birth, and place of birth, please?
Sure, my name is Dan Orsini. I was born on May 29th, 1920, in South Glens Falls, New York.
Okay. What was your educational background prior to entering service?
Okay, I graduated from St. Mary's Academy in Glens Falls, 1938. And then the following year, 1939, I attended South Glens Falls High School for a postgraduate course. And that was the extent of my high school years. Okay.
Okay. Now, when did you go into service?
May 4th, 1940.
Okay. Why did you decide to enlist? You enlisted, I imagine, at that point. You enlisted.
Yes, I did. Yeah.
Why
yeah,
did you
right.
decide, and why
Well, the things around Glens Falls were kind of tough. Things around the area. There were no jobs available for the younger people, and there were 3 or 4 of us who decided that, well, what the heck? Let's enlist into the services. They were looking for people to go into the services at the time. It was peacetime. So, to make a long story short, I traveled to Albany, New York, and within 2 days I became a U.S. Marine.
Now, why did you select the Marine Corps?
Okay, that's a good question, because I went down there specifically to enlist into the Coast Guard. And the guy that I went down with was found to be physically unfit for service, at that time, okay? So I walked out with him, then I walked by a Marine standing there, and I said, "Who are you?" He said, "I'm a Marine, that's my Marine recruiter." So I went in, and inside of an hour I was in the Marines. Just one of those things. I had read about them, but I was too young to understand, what it was all about. I learned quick.
Where were you inducted, and where did you go for basic training?
I was inducted in Albany on that date, 4th of May, 1940, and they sent me to Parris Island, South Carolina. At that time, that was the only boot camp in the Marines. And spent, maybe 12 weeks there as a boot.
Now, what kind of weapons did you use? Did you have the 03?
Yeah, the Springfield 03. Yeah.
How about the type of helmet? Did you have the World War I type helmet?
No. At that time, they had come out with the regular World War II helmet. At that time, it wasn't shaped quite like the one that they have now, or in World War II,
Right.
but it was similar to that. It wasn't the old rim.
Right.
It wasn't that.
Okay.
Yeah.
How would you rate your training?
How would I rate my training?
Rate your training,
It
yes.
was tough. I mean, yeah, it was all blood and guts, and that's like I was telling you, I found out quickly what the Marines were about. And I was an athlete anyway, so all the things that we had to do didn't really bother me. A lot of running, a lot of crawling, a lot of getting up in the morning, and boot training was boot training. How to defend yourself, how to kill your enemy. And I got to say, in all honesty, that back in 1940, I didn't expect to be using some of that training, which I did later on in life, okay? And so I was there 12 weeks, and I can't say that I enjoyed my boot training, but it didn't do me in. Yeah.
Now, was this your first time away from home?
Yeah, really.
How did you feel about that?
It didn't bother me that much. I just kept in touch with the people at home, but I wasn't the type to melt under any pressure, and I just did the best I could with what I had to work with. Only made $21 a month. Had a bar of soap and a pail for washing and stuff like that, and that was the way it was then. And there were a lot of us in the same boat. Young guys, some college people and some not college, and we didn't have any people like desert or feel bad. It was all, they were there because they wanted to be there. They weren't drafted,
Right.
and so that made a big difference. Yeah.
Did you receive any specialized training at all?
Not at boot camp. No.
After boot camp?
After boot camp, I received a lot of specialized training. Yes, I did. Yeah.
Do you remember where you were and your reaction when you heard about Pearl Harbor?
Well, can we back up?
Sure.
One? Yeah.
Sure.
Because you're asking me about specialized training.
Yes, okay.
And don't forget, I enlisted in 40.
Yes, right.
Okay? I mean, is it all right if I review some of these things?
Yeah.
One of the things, just before we left boot camp, we each had an interview. They called me into some office. And the guy said, can you type? I said, yeah, I can type. I learned it at South Glens Falls High School. He said, okay, sit down at that typewriter. So I sat down, and he asked me to type some stuff. Yeah, that's okay. You're all done. So I walked out, and 15 minutes later, they called me back in to tell me that I had been chosen to be assigned to the Marine Corps Institute, which was in Washington, D.C. I heard Washington, D.C. I almost fell apart. I said, what am I going to do in Washington, D.C.? So I found myself in Washington, D.C. for the next 3 years, 3.5 years, maybe. And like I say in my resume here, a lot of good things happened to me, a lot of specialized training. I'm talking tough training there, too. And I grew up as a Marine, okay? Immediately, I was assigned to the Marine Barracks at 8th and I Streets in Washington, D.C., just as a Marine PFC. And it took a little bit of time, but I worked my way up the ladder. And when I became a sergeant, they assigned me to the White House in the Capitol Guard. So that meant that, and I was kind of proud of that. They had to wear dress blues and all that stuff. And I found myself with the president on many occasions, President Roosevelt. I went to Warm Springs, Georgia with him 2 or 3 different times on the special train that he had. And our job there was strictly guard duty. As a matter of fact, when I remember President Roosevelt driving in and out of the Warm Springs complex, it was always in that open car that he was familiar with, you know, and it still sits today at Hyde Park down here in New York. And I attended many dedications with the president. The dedication of the Naval Hospital in Bethesda, which was built about that time. And he was there to lay the cornerstone for that building. And I was there for that. Let's see, what else happened there? Oh, when the president was elected for the 4th time, 3 or 4 of us were, because we were on the White House Guard, we were asked if we wanted to attend the inauguration ceremonies, which were at the House of Representatives, the Capitol building. So I was one of about 35 or 40 Marines who were among that group of people, and I have a photo of it here someplace. And I saw the president when he was sworn in. And that kind of excited me. I kind of liked that whole thing. And that was his inauguration. The same day, we went to the inaugural ball, which was at the Mayflower Hotel. The same group of guys. I happened to sit at the same table with the Supreme Court Justice, Felix Frankfurter, at the time, and Mickey Rooney. Mickey Rooney was a young kid. He was one of the entertainers that night. So I had that opportunity to share the table with those guys, you know. So that's something we don't forget.
What were some of the things you talked about at the table?
Well, there were 10 of us at each table, okay, and Mr. Frankfurter, he was just a nice little guy. He talked very, he was a well-spoken individual, and I didn't really, he was just, as far as I was concerned, he was a civilian. I didn't know who the hell he was, and I didn't put much stock into the fact that he was a Supreme Court Justice. So what, you know? Didn't mean much to me at the time, but it meant a lot to me later on in life. I have a copy of the original invitation for the inauguration. You might want to take a look at that. I have some notes in there.
Well, if you, let's see, can we get this?
We could probably photocopy that.
Yeah,
Yeah, I think so.
yeah, but if you, hold it up. How about Mickey Rooney? Did you ever get to talk to him at all?
Oh yeah,
or?
I talked to him quite a lot. Yeah, he wouldn't shut up. Yeah.
Okay.
Now, could I go back to the question I asked before about Pearl Harbor? Where were you, and do you recall
Yeah.
your reaction to that?
Absolutely. All right. On December the 7th, 1941, I was playing basketball at the Naval War College when informed of the Pearl Harbor attack by the Japanese. And on December the 8th, along with another contingent of Marines, we once again went back to the House of Representatives, where I witnessed the President give his Day of Infamy speech. That was one of the greatest days of my
So
life.
you were there at the time?
Oh, I was right behind him.
Really?
Well, I was maybe 80 feet from him.
Mm-hmm.
I was, there were 400 or 500 House and Senate members at that time. It wasn't like it is today, with thousands of people. Back then, there were the same number of House of Representatives and Senators, but believe me, it was a much smaller group. And that was above in the gallery, and that's where I was stationed, but the Marines were all over the place.
Were you armed at all?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, we sure were. Yeah. Yeah, we had the 03 with us. Yeah, and we were armed. Yeah, we were. And that was one of the few times. That's a good question, because that's one of the few times we were armed. I was armed with a .45 pistol and my 03 rifle, only because the day before they attacked, and so that changed everything immediately.
So the other times you were with the president prior to that, then you were not armed, even though you were
No,
the security
I was
detail.
armed in Warm Springs.
Oh, okay. Well,
Yeah,
Okay.
not around D.C. though. They kind of, but they had the Secret Service around, and so we weren't armed at that on those occasions. No, we were more of a security type detail, keep everybody in line, and that kind of thing, just to show that we were there.
Can I ask a question? You were with the president then for several years.
Yes, I was.
Did you notice any physical changes with him in
Sure,
the times
sure.
that you?
I
the
did,
time you were
because
with him?
the first time I ever saw the president was, I went to the White House many times. I saw the president swim in his pool, okay? And I knew he had a physical disability. In fact, somewhere along the line here, I got, I don't know where I put it. This is a photo of the area when he gave his speech. You may have, those papers they gave you before? Yeah. That I'm not sure that is included in there. I don't know. I was going to mention anyway that FDR's birthday is on January 30th, and that's when they started issuing the FDR dimes. Okay? And, oh, here it is.
What were some of the changes that you saw in the president?
The physical changes. The physical changes.
Yes.
Yeah. I knew that he wasn't well. Right here is, that's the dime. The physical changes with the president, he was always smiling, and as often as he could, they would stand him erect. He didn't like to be seen seated. And I noticed that I knew what he had. I mean, we were told that he had developed at the age of 23 or 28, something like that, infantile paralysis. It became known then as polio. So I don't think he withered away or anything like that. He was always, he was a handsome man, and he spoke well. And when he was on his feet, he really did a great job. But you can't help but notice, in the 3 or 4 years that there was a difference. Not tragic, but there was a difference from the first time that I'd seen him until the last time I saw him, which was in 1943, before I left for overseas. Well, he was a great man. Yeah, always admired him. That was the only time I ever voted Democrat. I'm proud of that.
Did you? You probably got to meet his family too.
I met Mrs. Roosevelt, and of course the major, Jim Roosevelt. He was a Marine, so I met him 2 or 3 different times. Yeah, when the president went to Warm Springs for his, for his relaxation or rehab, a lot of his family went down there also. Don't forget now, a lot of this was during peacetime, so it wasn't hard to see the president down there because you wouldn't be able to do that today with Bush, or with the current president, whatever. But times were a little bit different then. But after the war, it was a little tighter.
So you were there for 3 years. What happened after you left the White House?
After I left the Marine Barracks in Washington,
Yes,
D.C.
yes.
Okay, now I requested to be transferred, okay? What happened was, they came to me and they said, Dan, we know you want to get transferred because you've been here a long time and there's a war going on and you're at that time I had just gotten promoted to Sergeant Major. And at the age of 23, they told me that I was the youngest Sergeant Major ever in the Marine Corps. Because usually when you think of the Sergeant Major in the Marine Corps, you think of some old grizzly guy, 45 or 50, who'd been in there with all kinds of stripes. And when they honored me by making me a Sergeant Major, they said I rated it and whatever. My record spoke for itself. So they said, we'd like to have you go to officer's school, officer's candidate school. Okay, I said, but they said, you're going to be assigned to the 1st Marine Division in New River, North Carolina. That's where we're going to send you. But we'd like to have you go to officer's school first, get your commission, and then go and join the troops with the 1st Marine Division. I don't want to make this sound like I'm bragging or anything, but I went through OCS. I received my commission as a 2nd lieutenant. Okay? The very next day when I read my orders, they ordered me to stay at Quantico as a machine gun instructor for 16 more weeks. That destroyed me. I didn't want any part of that. I didn't even like the machine gun. So anyway, that was an order. And I went to my CO, colonel at the time, and I said, well, what's this all about? I was told I was going to go back and join my group. Well, he said, these are your orders, and that's the way it is. What alternative do you have? You can resign your commission and make you a Sergeant Major again. I said, I'll resign my commission right now. So I resigned my commission as a 2nd lieutenant and kept my enlisted rank, then went to New River as a Sergeant Major. So that's when I joined my unit. I was a Sergeant Major. Now, did that answer that question?
Yes, yes.
Okay.
I think there's probably a little more prestige in being a sergeant major than a 2nd lieutenant.
I thought so at the time, no question about it. I didn't like what they were doing to me. I wouldn't have I wouldn't have thought too much of it if they allowed me to go back to my unit as a 2nd lieutenant. I would be considered a platoon leader, but with the service that I had, they wouldn't have, But I wanted to go back with those guys, and I'm really happy I did that. The rank didn't mean that much to me. Yeah. And that's unusual, but that's how I felt about it. All right, now it says, after 2 months at Camp Lejeune, my division left for overseas duty in the South Pacific. I participated and saw action during the invasion of Guam, which was in 1944, where the Marines built airfields for B-29's aircraft. It was estimated at that time that there were about 10,000 American casualties. This is American casualties, dead, and over 40,000 Japanese killed. I took one of the official photos of the flag raising on Guam. I may have that here someplace. I don't know. I have a lot of photos and a lot of things here.
So Guam is where you saw your first combat?
That's my first combat action. Yeah. Yeah. Somebody's got to look through this, pick some stuff up.
I'll look through it.
Yeah. Anyway, this is the photo that I took of the flag raising on Guam, 1944. I took the picture. I wrote that down back 60 years ago. So that other people had taken photos too, like the famous one on Iwo. But to me, this meant a lot. Taking a photo of the flag raising. I sent copies of this, all over the world. And in June of 1945, the Marines landed on Okinawa, the last battle in the South Pacific. My battalion, which at that point happened to be the 11th Marines, which were artillery, saw action in 2 locations, the Naha Airport and the Shuri Castle areas. Estimated killed Americans were 14,000 killed, and over 63,000 Japanese. That was a fierce campaign. Okinawa was tough. Our commanding general, General Simon D. Buckner, was killed during a mortar attack on our positions. He was a great leader, and I attended his burial, and in fact I have a photo here of his resting place with me saluting him. While temporarily attached to the Marine Division on Okinawa, I received a letter of commendation from the commanding general for duties performed as a member of a Special Forces unit, a 2-day reconnaissance mission, which I still don't even talk about it anymore. But they sent 40 of us on a 2-day mission to kind of look around 2 airfields on an adjoining island to see how they would take our aircraft, okay? And my CO was killed, to make a long story short, and I took over the battalion, I took over the squad when he was killed and brought him back, and that's why I got the letter, I guess, that kind of thing. Shortly after the Okinawa campaign, President Truman approved the atomic bombing of Hiroshima and Nagasaki, which killed over 120,000 Japanese and brought the war to an end, eliminating the need for an invasion of the Japanese mainland.
Where were you when you heard about that, and what kind of reaction did you have to that?
Oh, we were all on, I was on Okinawa, and we all jumped for joy that day when we heard about, oh, you're talking about
The dropping of the atomic
the dropping,
bomb.
oh, okay, that was different,
Yeah.
okay. That's where I was, on Okinawa, and we were told that the first, we heard about the first bomb, didn't know about the second one yet. So when we heard that the atomic bomb had been dropped on Hiroshima and that it might end the war, we weren't really sure. And then about the second was bombed, the second bomb was dropped on Nagasaki, we were kind of the opinion then that maybe the war might end. Well, which it did, and we were ecstatic about that, because somewhere along the line here it says our division. Let's see now. Anyway, I have it. Maybe I have it here.
Just to digress a
Go ahead.
second.
Go ahead.
When you heard about the death of President Roosevelt, being that you were so close to him, it must have hit you pretty hard.
Yeah, it did.
didn't
I was on board ship at the time when that happened. Yeah, and a lot of people, felt bad about it because he was our president, and it's kind of hard to lose the commander in chief. And he was a well-liked man. Besides being president, he was just a nice individual. But he had that cerebral hemorrhage down there. He just died, and we all felt bad about it. But they swore Truman in, and we said, okay, we got a new president. He's our commander-in-chief. We're going to go with him. And they had no choice. For the record, Okinawa was to be the staging area for the invasion of the Japanese mainland. That's what we were told after the bombs were dropped. So we felt better. We were wondering where all these guys were coming from and why they were, coming to Okinawa. So, I want to tell a little story. May I, at this point?
Sure.
And this is one of those what-if stories that could have changed the war completely. I talk about this only to certain people. And this goes back, the United States Navy had a ship, the USS Indianapolis, cruiser Indianapolis. Maybe some of the people you've interviewed talked about this, I'm not really sure. The two atomic bombs that were assembled in the United States, but not loaded, not keyed in, were put aboard the Indianapolis. Now, nobody knows this. Nobody knew it until after the war. And the Indianapolis took those 2 bombs to the islands, to the Marianas, to the island of Tinian, where we built those B-29 bases. Okay? And 6 days after they had their leave and everybody got on board ship again, and they left their atomic weapons there, the Indianapolis left to go back, I don't know where, back to the Pacific or wherever they were. They were in 1,100 miles from Okinawa. They were torpedoed on the way back. And they lost 1,100 naval personnel. The ship was sunk. That was a story where they had 300 seamen in the sea for 2 or 3 days. Nobody knew where the ship was. There was silence. They were running deep. They were under orders to run silent. No radio, nothing. Going and coming. In other words, no one knew where the ship was when they went to the islands, and they had that same secret when they left. Apparently, they hadn't reached the destination where they could turn everything on when they were hit, okay? That's why it took 3 or 4 days to find these 300 guys. It was only through an aerial survey that somebody said, hey, what the hell's down there? They found 300 people in the water. Now, that's the what if. What if that ship had been sunk on the way to the islands? That would have meant that 2 atomic bombs would have been at the bottom of the ocean, not armed, but they would have been there, and they wouldn't have been dropped. Who knows what would have happened? That was my what if story. Pretty interesting, I thought. Well, where are we here? Okay, that was all right, in December of 1945, okay? That was a few months after the bombs were dropped. In December of 1945, my division, the 1st Marine Division, was ordered to Peking, China. And we were ordered to take over the U.S. Embassy there and to keep peace between the nationalists and the Communist Chinese. During several skirmishes, several Marines were killed before the Marines took command of the embassy from the Communists, who had about, they had 2,000 or 3,000 fatalities. We had about 100, I think. Not important at this point, but I wanted to mention to my family that my first ever blood donation came when some of us were called to donate blood to a few wounded Marines. At that time, it was arm-to-arm donation, you know, and the needles were much larger than they are today. My family wanted to find out how I started giving blood, because since I was discharged, I gave over 15 gallons of blood, I guess, in my time. And that's where I gave the first time. December of 1940.
Were any Japanese units in the area at the time, or were they out of there by that time?
No, that's right. No, well, strictly Chinese, Chinese communists, yeah. And they were ready to come over the hill. I can tell you that we at a certain particular time here, we were in Peking. I was there for a long time. I don't want to get ahead of my story because let me tell you later. In December of 1945, I received a letter of commendation from the commanding officer of the 2nd Battalion, 11th Marines, for duties performed while Sergeant Major during a very trying time, when experienced men were being discharged far faster than they could be replaced, especially when Communist forced Chinese were only a few miles from our position. We knew they were there, and they knew we were where we were, and they wanted in the worst way to get into Peking. In January of 1946, the 1st Marine Division and a division of nationalist Chinese gathered at Tiananmen Square for a ceremonial troop formation and inspection. That's approximately 20,000 people total. I was impressed with Tiananmen Square, a real huge area. Part of the occasion was the awarding of medals by the nationalist China to 30 or 40 Marines, sort of a thank you from China to America for helping save their country from becoming communistic. I was once again in the right place at the right time. I received a medal, and they called it the Order of the Cloud and Banner, from the President of China, Generalissimo Chiang Kai-shek. But according to their custom, we were not allowed to bring the awards to our country. We had to return them to them. But we were allowed to take photos, which I did, which I have here. And while at the American Embassy in Peking, I met Madame Chiang Kai-shek at several functions, a great lady. She was popular, probably more popular than her husband. She was educated here at Radcliffe College in the United States. Our division was ordered home in February 1946, and I was honorably discharged at Bainbridge, Maryland, after over 6 years of service. And I had several citations and medals and stuff like that. Okay?
Okay. Did you join a veterans organization organizations after you returned?
Oh yeah. My father-in-law, who was a World War I veteran, saw to it that I immediately became a member of the American Legion when I got home. So I've been a member of the American Legion ever since 1946, I guess it was. And I still belong to the one over here in South Glens Falls. And Joe Fiore, who will be in here this afternoon, and I formed the Marine Corps League Memorial Detachment Number 2. And we're still members of that. He's more active than I. He is Mr. Marine Corps League as far as I'm concerned in this area. Joe is one of, by the way, I want to mention that whatever I did in the service, I was fortunate. I never got wounded. I saw a lot of action. And I always thank the Lord that I didn't get hit. But I was near Jimmy Butterfield when he got blinded. I don't know if you know about Jimmy or not. He got blinded on Okinawa. And I consider him to be a hero. And the guy that you're going to have in here this afternoon, Joe Fiore, I consider him to be a hero. I used to call him the Pineapple Kid. He walked around with grenades in his pocket, waiting to raise hell, and he did. He got wounded 2 or 3 different times. And there's a lot of other of my friends that I consider to be the heroes. I just want to touch on one story. The guy's name is Dave Sexton. He lives in South Glens Falls, New York. He was in the U.S. Army, World War II. He landed in Normandy with June the 6th, I guess, 1944. He was wounded badly. They threw him on a truck, thinking that he had died. And he was on a truck with a bunch of dead soldiers. And Graves registration came along, and they tagged everybody, and they discovered that Dave was alive. They picked him up, brought him. He spent 12 weeks in the hospital overseas, and then he came home. But this guy is really, really a wonderful person, and that's the kind of a person who made being in the service worthwhile. People like these guys, So they were the real heroes. The other heroes are buried under the white crosses that you see in the cemeteries around the world.
Now, you also joined the reserves once you were discharged?
Oh, yes. Yeah, we joined the Marine Corps Reserve locally here. And because of my rank, Sergeant Major at the time, they knew I had a second lieutenant's commission at one time. They said, somebody said, Dan, why don't you become the commanding officer of the Marine Corps Reserve, which I did. So I was their commanding officer for almost a year. Yeah, that was pre-Korea time, okay? And I think I told somebody the reason I got out of it after that.
Did you make use of the GI Bill at all?
No, never took advantage of that because I had a lot of schooling in the service. One of the things I did while I was in the service, I was a member of the Marine Corps Institute, and that was their school for Marines. And I took a lot of courses and got a lot of diplomas from the Marine Corps Institute. The only further schooling the other schooling took place while I was employed in civilian life at Scott Paper Company, but they paid for me to go to school. I had 3 years at LaSalle University. I got an accounting degree from LaSalle University. Yeah. No, I didn't take any advantage of the GI Bill. No.
Did you ever keep in contact with anyone who was in service with you?
Oh yes, I went to in the first 2 or 3 years after we were discharged, I attended some 1st Marine Division reunions. They were like Philadelphia, New York City, and other places. And it was nice to see, the people that you were with. But after a while, they just dwindled, And we lost touch, and we didn't keep in touch. More locally here than over there. So that's how it was.
How do you think being in service changed or affected your life?
It made me a better person. There's no question about that. Because the one thing I learned about was respect for the next person, no fooling around, took life seriously, and there was all the training that I went through in the Marines did me well in civilian life, many ways. I worked at Scott Paper here in Fort Edward for 35 years, And I think I was promoted so many times. I think it was because of my military background, and I knew how to get along with people. I knew what to do and the right things to do, and I had a little bit of I felt that, hey, they taught me these nice things, use them, So I knew how to get along with people. They put me in charge of other people, and the military helped great deal. And I think it's all because I went in on my own. I went in 1940. So whatever happened to me, it was my decision to go in, and I never regretted a moment of being in there, except when I didn't like seeing all my friends get killed or hurt and stuff like that, and that's part of war.
Okay. All right, well, thank you very much for your interview.
All right, sir. Thank you.